never going to let these kind of artificial blocks block the flow of how things are moving through my heart, things are moving through my gut, or somebody's that I love is in a hard space and is facing oppression or hardship in any sort of way. I'm going to fight to clear the block, to be a witness to what is authentically going on, not to please some political party, not to please some ideology. Where is my ground? Where are my roots? What do I lean on? Who do I grow with? What do I trust? I knew I just needed an experience that would immediately throw me into the edges and into the unknown.
You're listening to Find the Good News, episode 119, The Trembling Trees, a Beacon Series conversation featuring Jonathon Stalls, artist, writer, activist, and founder of Intrinsic Paths. Find the Good News is produced by Parker Brand Creative Services, a branding agency that thinks sideways, pushes forward, and gets your brand up. See what else we do at parkerbrandup.com. Have you ever had a transformative personal experience so profound, so mysterious, that it escaped your ability to frame it with words? If you've listened to this program for any length of time, then you likely know that I've had such an experience. A moment in this lifetime that seemed to change every other day after it, or at least my perception of those moments. Many of my guests have intimately shared their experiences, and I'm fascinated how across language barriers, geography, and varied circumstantial occurrences, so many walk through the transformative door and end up in similar places, motivated and invigorated to use their lives in the service of goodness, justice, mercy, and love. In this episode, I visit with a being who has shown up in the world with a genuineness that I deeply appreciate. My guest, Jonathon Stalls, is the founder of Intrinsic Paths, and his feet have carried him on a mission to inspire the people he encounters. Jonathon encourages us to embrace an unhurried, meditative way of being that has the potential to heal on a very deep and personal level, in turn offering the tools required to repair the desperate fissures in this world we all share. He did not come to this place without going through the bardo of personal pain, which I feel largely influenced his visceral understanding of the aching his human brothers and sisters experience. By acknowledging this deep creaking in the world, he is able to fully embrace the joyous cacophony that we so often disregard in the hustle to be someone. This is clear in Jonathon's deep love and connection to the unabashedly beautiful and simple things to be found in nature, which take on new and profound visual meaning through his artwork and naturecraft. Through his pedestrian dignity signal, he adopts a role as advocate for our fellow beings that find themselves at the mercy of congested, poorly planned roadways and cities designed primarily for those of us with vehicles, cities and communities that largely forget those that use their feet to carry them to school and work. It is my reflection that Jonathon Stalls, through his life and work, is holding up a living mirror to the world. What we find in him is a shimmering beauty firmly attached to a murky pain. In that, I find a type of truth that escapes words or full understanding. But in this conversation, Jonathon and I try to put prose to this mystery. Now, for just a little while, allow yourself to show up just as you are, with all your hopes and happiness, your failures, and your fears. Make a point to look right into the lovely mess. Then tune your attention to this good news beacon and press play on a little good news.
Wake up this morning, dreaming up a story. I can hear the way it's going, 'cause you're laughing in your sleep. On the path to your deliverance and a holy wall of light.
Old news, bad news, fake news. Sometimes you want to shut those signals down and seek a better source. With my Find the Good News Beacon series, I tune into good people doing good works wherever I can find them. I scan across the full spectrum of life, seeking out human beings that have turned their dials towards helping others, aligning their time, resources, and talents with goodness, justice, mercy, and love. In each episode, I sync up with the hearts and minds of my extraordinary guests. We have dynamic conversations that invigorate the mind long after our transmission has ended. I discover the critical life experiences that shape them, the perspectives that drive them, and the fundamental beliefs that have anchored them to a path of goodness. There's a lot of background noise in the world. My name is Orrin Parker, and I'm cutting through the static to find the good.
I love you just as well.
So I guess just to kind of put the connections together, it was James Hyatt who had sent me your name.
Yeah.
Do you? And I guess I don't really know what the connection is. Like, so how do you guys know each other?
Well, and we don't know each other really well. I mean, we connected just a little bit at. So I was a student, and then also after going through the school, was doing some programming and hosting practices with the Living School for the Center for Action and Contemplation. So that's how we connected initially, and I think just staying in touch through the webs and.
Yeah. Right on.
Yeah, but no, I don't know him very well. So we've been meaning to find a way to connect and just haven't made it happen yet. But yeah.
Yeah, I wondered. I didn't know. He didn't really give me a whole lot of information. He said, I really think that you should talk to this guy and have him on Find the Good News, And I said, man, I'll just send me a contact link. And so the path, and followed all of your links. And I actually just told my wife earlier, I said, I think we're going to have a really good conversation. I see a lot of common ground for sure. I mean, you and I have some more crossover territory than I initially realized.
Wow. Love it.
And, every conversation, I always wonder, how's it going to start and what paths are we going to walk down? But I think today, there was one thing that just really jumped out at me, and let's just branch off from there, and this is no pun intended.
I love it.
I was on your website, just kind of digging around, and I happened to notice that you mentioned the juniper tree. And then I looked at your logo, and I said, okay, so that logo is the juniper tree. And then I went into your jewelry and earth spur. Yeah. And I was like, okay, this is a bit serendipitous because yesterday I was in a sacred space that I get to visit a few times a year. And it's not near my home, but I happened to have a job there yesterday, and I was out of town, and I stopped at a cemetery that I always sit at. I go to every year, and there's a particular iron bench that I sit at, just kind of melted away, and I noticed that there was a shadow that I'd never really paid attention to before, and over my head where this iron bench is was the branch of a juniper tree. And right near the a marker that I have placed on the side of the highway for my father, there's a juniper tree that grows there too. And I thought yesterday, man, how interesting. I never noticed this juniper tree. This juniper tree before. And I personally, at that moment, made the connection to my father and the tree that because I'll harvest some pieces off of it to make some smudging wands and things like that. And then I go on your site,
so wild.
And it hits me, and it just jumped out. And I've been on your site a few times, but it didn't jump out like it did today. And I thought I'll call it odd. Yeah, a little odd that the three kind of happen. I always take that as kind of a good sign that a path is sort of opening up for a great conversation.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yes, just bringing in the juniper to honor this shared space. It makes, it immediately affirms the connection as well. Yeah, they are sacred beings. They have I could go on and on. This entire podcast could literally be juniper, but it's. I think the just in summary, the twisting and the emerging of these branches and the slow growth, the unhurried growth, and the kind of the from a distance, or at least first glance, junipers tend to have kind of this kind of rough and cut. It's not like kind of immediately like clear what's going on. There's a lot of complexity, and it's kind of like dusty and with all the shedding, and it's just got. But when you get into the inner workings of these purples and reds and oranges and this sweet but courageous smell, and mixed with the way these branches reach into the places between that so few trees and branches reach into. I just, and there's so much in the peeling and the shedding that is so incredible to me. The constant shedding of what no longer serves and the constant emerging into new bending spaces. I'm obsessed. All of it.
So that's fascinating, and I gotta say, just listening to you talk about it that way, it's just further alignment for me, because the space I was in opted, and I've waxed poetic about it. Watching you and listening to you do that, I'm going, wow, I see so much of the way I felt about this other element of nature that I discovered in that same space. And hearing you do that about this tree that I've never really keyed in on until that was 2.5 decades. Yeah. But I just never keyed in on it before. Just, I don't know, just further reinforces for me, I don't know, this connective tissue that we just can't see sometimes until it's time to see it.
Completely. Yeah. And I, there's so much with trees for me. I mean, as someone who spends so much time, on foot and moving through the world that way, the nourishment, the relationship, the breathing. And also as, an artist, as an LGBTQ person, as there's so many things, but just in general, a sensitive person, someone who's trying to kind of bring out like authentic emotion and, imperfectly always, but like just trying, and to have these rooted, specifically juniper cedars, like there's so much wisdom. And I have, just dear friends within the Southern Ute tribe here in Colorado also. And so the ceremony and the ritual connected to junipers that have been just shared with me in some ways, but it's just in there. So the logo that you saw on the website, I have this small, funky, kind of DIY. It's so like horribly made because I have no idea what I'm doing, but it's such an amazing space. It's so sacred to me. It's a funky little tiny home that's kind of tucked away right next to some public land, and outside that little loft window when I sleep is this juniper tree that is depicted in the logo. And every time, so maybe similar to your practice and intention with the cemetery and other spaces, like it's a ritual of greeting and meeting and listening and just inviting all those themes to kind of revisit. It's wonderful.
Wow, man. It's relaxing to hear you, or comforting would probably be the right word to listen to you say those words. And you said that about us sharing a space right now. I think that is something in this age that we're living in. One, there's this unique opportunity that we have to be able to kind of sit here and have this sort of intimate connection. And at the same time, not. Right. That we're using technology in the best way, in my opinion, that it should be used, which is to be able to share that. I think back to my own journey or path or the beginnings of it, and I think about how desperately in those early days these types of connections and couldn't find them, and it was a lot of isolation and sort of inside my own skull, right? I mean, so I didn't know what spaces were safe, and as a young man I would test the waters and found often that there wasn't a lot of safety because it was very misunderstood, and I didn't even have the language at that time to really express. I didn't have any kind of command of it. I had this no crevasses experience to sort of almost translate for others so we could share, if that made any sense.
Absolutely.
There were no words, you know.
Oh, I relate. Yeah, majorly. You know, so it's funny. I'm in the middle. So I'm a week and a half away from turning in a manuscript project book thing. And I've never written a book. This is all new. It's terrifying for someone who's mostly in the body, trying to put it into words and in the mind. It's a good process, but it is hard.
I believe it.
And so I'm in the middle, but speaking to what you're talking about, a lot of the themes, at least when referencing some of my personal just aching and, you know, this isolation of not, the word I always connect to a lot. And again, linking back to this juniper and to some of these elements in the natural world as like this kind of genuine mirroring, like to be mirrored in a way, to be seen in all of the aches, in all the spaces that we often just don't have words for, like the trembling realms, the realms that kind of just hum and shake and feel hurt, but also feel like full of joy and celebration, but also sad and just pain in general, and but also dance, and also soaring and screaming and howling because you don't have any other way to express so all these different like emotive, very like human realities that, for me, as you know, I moved every 2 years. Growing up, I went to 12 different schools. So I lived in West Virginia, Tennessee, Georgia, Colorado, California, always a new student. And so I just was like, keep the peace, keep the peace. Don't be the reason. Do not be the reason that there is conflict, as long as you can keep the peace. And so I would just suppress. And that isolation you talk about is a real visceral, you know, wound reality for me. And so the juniper trees and the flowing streams and moving in an unhurried way with the softness of soil, but the sharpness of rock, like these different elements that just affirm expression, letting stuff be released. You don't need to have answers. You don't need to solve it. Just be seen, beloved.
Yeah, man.
Be seen.
I understand this. It's not a stretch for me to understand this. And it's interesting how we can get to this from different places. To the isolation, I've tried to identify where that began for me. You know, I have lots of theories, you know, clear enough, I suppose, to really, and the entanglements too between different types of pain, you know, to where you pull on it and you go, oh, well, I can't look at that without looking at the other, because over time they twist together into this sort of indiscernible rope, you know. But nature, as you so beautifully just said, judge me. Yeah. It didn't look at me a particular way. I got to be a creature like the other creatures, you know, just for these short periods of time, and everything just went about its own way. And I know it seems odd to say it, but it was like in that type of space, to not be considered was almost a gift, you know, like to not have an expectation of any kind.
Oh my God. Yes. Yeah. And to literally be that kind of an idiom in the unfolding of it all. Like you're existing. I am worthy because I exist. I am worthy because I exist. I'm here. I'm breathing. All of this is just, I'm participating as I am here, just by being here. And, you know, and what are all those different lessons, and it's just always, I need it so much to this day. I don't have any answers for a lot of it. It's just, I just know the medicine of being witnessed, just in those moments, you know, that, Yeah,
man. Thomas, exactly the way he said it, but
my takeaway from what he said and something that he wrote was talking about watching the sunrise and seeing the whole of everything in it, in that moment, like to truly witness it and be with it. But he said something that just stuck with me. He said, all the way back through all of my ancestors to the very beginning, for all of them that never experienced it the way I'm experiencing it now, it's like the fullness of all that they missed is now like born within me, and it's almost like my duty to like witness it for them in that lineage of just these unknown people all the way back. And I thought, what a beautiful weight to carry. If you have to carry something to witness, just to behold for those that never had the opportunity to behold.
Oh my gosh. Oh my God. Yes. Yeah. So with you in that. And there's so many. I love that. I love that Merton space with the sunrise and sunsets. And it always shows up for me, the transitions and of light and dark and color, and thinking and honoring ancestors in that way, brother. Yeah, I love that. And it makes me think of also too, just, and this is again, I bear with me if whoever's listening, whoever's here, that I'm always going to be referencing walking, but I just unhurried movement, right. Like as just this constant, like, just walking with ancestors in a way where it's just, you're constantly inviting them to be participants with you. That witnessing that you describe is so powerful. And I also, I'm always thinking about walking with, like, how are they still here and showing themselves? How are they still speaking? What is this unique witnessing trying to teach, in this time that we're not just these isolated flesh bags, but like we're these cosmic creations that are so beyond our understanding. How could ancestors and lineages and bloodlines and wounds, but also dreams, move with us in our steps and our tears and our witnessing of sunsets? Oh my gosh. So yes. Beautiful.
So I have to ask you, this is something I ask most guests that I get to this opportunity to visit. You give yourself away in so many beautiful ways. And I just wonder at what point or when, if you've even identified it, that begins for you. Like, where does this begin for you? Some people say I've just always been this way, but most people have a moment that they can almost go back to an early awakening moment where a series of critical shifts where they can just say, I can identify this time period when these sort of, Dharma doors begin to open, for me.
Wow. What a beautiful question. Love how you frame that question. There's probably two significant things. There is a tapestry of things, but I'd say the two particular things. One was related to my mother, who was going through a really hard time. So some family things, heavy. I was the oldest child. We moved a lot. I was peacemaker of all things, burying everything. So I had this complicated role that I had kind of built my own castle around, to peacemake and please and fix and avoiding all the things going on the inside. So that came kind of crashing down in a really intense way related to my family in my early 20s. And that crashing and falling piece started to kind of break this clinging, whatever the clinging was, to controlling that castle and that way of being, pleasing other people or other stories or other ideas around me, whatever it was, I was clearly clinging, and it started to shake. And then later on, my coming out journey was really, really intense for me, because I was the people pleaser. I was the one who was, do not be the reason that to create conflict with your truth, with your reality, with your needs, with your expressions, with these things that have been in you since you were, so that was such a rumbling. The ground truly rumbled as I was coming out. I was suicidal for about 3 months. And, it was this moment when I was attempting that edge. I was out literally on the edge of a rural road in Ireland. I was living out there for a year. And this was all those voices for 24 years, right? Just bubbling up, getting creative, getting, just real intense and hard and heavy. And it was the wind in the trees. It was the night sky. It was the different elements going on. And this was in the middle of the night that kind of drew me to just, just keep walking. Don't jump, don't step into that oncoming traffic. Just keep, and I would kind of go through. And so to your question, like surviving that, by the grace of nature and trees and wind and just this kind of glimpse of maybe seeing beyond what I was so consumed with, those things were kind of like the catalyst for like, okay, like, oh, wow, I can breathe and exist in these other dimensions that are beyond just pleasing and clinging, and kind of hoarding all these inner things just for the sake of others. And, which is so ironic because, you think like, oh, like, that would just mean, okay, well then it's all about you. It's all about you. But it's like, oh, it just becomes this more, the time after those kind of moving through those stages in my early mid-20s, it just became so clear how much more there was to explore related to being genuine, fully genuine in how to show up in the world. Again, imperfectly always, but like, I was so, after kind of crawling out of that dark time on that highway, when I kind of survived suicide, I just like, I'm never going back there. I'm never going to let these kind of artificial blocks block the flow of how, things are moving through my heart, things are moving through my gut when it feels wrong, or somebody's that I love is in a hard space and is facing oppression or hardship in any sort of way. Like I'm going to fight to clear the block, to be a witness to what is authentically going on, not to please some political party, not to please some ideology, not to please some limited, narrow, whoever said whatever. I'm not. And so it's just this. It was an experiment and unfolding, and it was all really messy. And then that's when I walked across the U.S. in 2010, because it was a big, jumbled mess of shit sprayed everywhere, brother. It was just like, okay, I know what I don't want, but I don't really know who I am. Where is my ground? Where are my roots? What do I lean on? Who do I grow with? What do I trust? And that's when I knew I just, and there were a lot of things in between that led up to that cross-country walk, but I knew I just needed an experience that would immediately throw me into the edges and into the unknown. And so that's when I left on March 1st in 2010. I had no idea what I was doing, was not a backpacker, was not, my pack was 90 pounds. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew exactly what I was doing in certain ways. I knew, but I didn't know. And that was a 242-day walk in 2010. It was just, I stayed with 120 strangers. It was literally a kind of a fumbling into walking into kind of reclaiming ground, choosing and trusting new soil, new nourishment from land and people, and kind of my own aching interior. So those are just kind of these micro summaries to your beautiful question.
Longtime Find the Good News listeners know that we often meander into topics on spirit, mysticism, religion, and wisdom traditions. If you are interested in these topics, I encourage you to seek out my new podcast, The Dawn Deacon with Brother Orrin. On the Dawn Deacon podcast, I consider my small place in the whole of creation, asking the old questions that have perplexed human beings for ages. Why are we here? Is there a reason for our existence? How do we balm our sufferings, enlighten our minds, and awaken our hearts? Are there powers, energies, and realities just beyond our ability to comprehend them? On the Dawn Deacon podcast, I share the teachings, practices, and perspectives I have gathered as I've made my varied, sacred, ordinary way. I hope you'll join me at the Dawn Deacon podcast so that we can traverse this landscape together. Just search The Dawn Deacon with Brother Orrin in your favorite podcast app or search engine, then subscribe.
I loved listening to that, man, because that is, as I'm so much just firing off as I'm listening to you. I mean, it's invigorating, for one, I have to tell you. I mean, I am so attracted to what you're saying, because especially what you said about that time where you were looking at what you, and all I kept thinking was identity. It's so tied to waking up. And you can, I look at, I'm sure you do too, you probably found lots of camaraderie in other stories of awakened beings, because you see the similarities. You're like, oh, they were one way, they were in a box of some kind, or they were a part of some sort of structure, whether that is the Buddha being a prince, within this, or really anybody, and you follow their path and you're like, okay, there's an identity that is formed around them. Yeah. And at some point that identity is just, it's a husk. It's real. The things that happen to you are real. They are in your mind. They're a part of you, but we form this stuff. It's like these little plates all around us. And then when you just stop identifying with the plates, it's like, is like you're looking at yourself and you're going, okay, I don't know what I'm seeing all of a sudden, because you're saying I'm not going to identify with all these things, these heavy plates that are all over me like armor. And now there's this lighter version of yourself. I mean, in me, I mean, even using the word self sometimes does not do it justice, because it's like something beyond the self. It's almost like you're getting to look at loving consciousness that wants to experience the world in a clearer way. It was fine to experience it as you with the plates and the pains and the weight and the burden, but it wants you to drop it like a locust shell. It just like says it's in you going, okay, now you've done this, but now that you've done this, I want you to see the world in a lighter, more loving way. And this, I'm speaking in a weird way, but like as me, see yourself as me for just in these moments. And it all just sort of turns into love. Like at that time, you start to, as you love the wind, you love the tree, it loves you back. You don't, the separation between you and those things probably started to dissolve, I imagine.
Yes, 100%. The separation element is it's such a great word for it, because it was, and I keep going back. I always reference just kind of the intuitive, the body, the trembling body, kind of the spaces between, your humble, messy frame that uses the restroom and cleans itself up and drools. And I mean, just the nature of humble, messy people falling on the ground because gravity wants us down, but somewhere, somehow we choose to stand up, or if we're in a wheelchair, continue moving. Like we are agents, we're being invited to participate in all these different relationships, and what blocks us from feeling our way in and fumbling our way into the complexity and nuance of those, rather than, or at least, alongside and being curious about when they get all boxed up and categorized and sliced up and separated. Because it's like, well, at some point, I love Thich Nhat Hanh's words. I use them all the time, but like, I carry these with me everywhere. It's like the last part of he's got this beautiful little invitation, Thich Nhat Hanh, contemplative, engaged Buddhist teacher. He's got this beautiful little frame around, walking with peace and, kiss the earth with your feet is what it's called, this little reading. But the end of it is earth will be safe when we feel safe in ourselves. And the horrifying but liberating reality of this, liberation and freedom and joy, but also pain and wounding being wrapped up in yours and mine and the trees and the stream, that we are actually radically not separate. And what does that mean for us and for how we move through the world? My goodness. So I just, the separation invitation is wondrous and devastating.
Yeah. Tied to your work, that you're making me think of something I've heard and read a few times in various different ways, but it's a Tibetan story about a monk that saw all the suffering in the world and wanted across the world all this pain. He envisioned that he would cover the world in leather to quell the fires. And a master told him, he said, there's a better way, because he thought, he wept because he knew there wasn't enough leather to cover the world, And the master said, you don't need to cover the world, you just need to put the leather on your feet. And then you go out into the world. When beautiful. I was looking at your work, I was like, man, this is what he's doing. I mean, you're going out, you've covered your feet with the leather, and now you've gone out to the world.
That's a beautiful story, beautiful example. Yes. And and I don't, that's exactly, and it's a constant, it's just experimenting. It's constantly, it's why, for me, I've always been an artist, and I don't know if that, I still don't know if that's the right frame, but it is a frame that I kind of like, that I breathe pretty widely in. And I just, I frame it as kind of a walking artist, and just, it's just this, it's unhurried, it's moving constantly, and it's just kind of ingesting through story and lived reality, and just the poetry and the songs of the natural world, and also the poetry and songs that are devastating in the more paved industrial world in some ways. And so, and I think that tension is so important, and that's why, again, just, the unhurried movement, the participation of walking or using a wheelchair, 1 to 3 miles an hour, the pace that is most regulating our circulatory systems and our brain, and also where we store wounding and trauma and hard things, that we're activating these really, really functional biological systems that have, wherever you are in the evolution reality, like the bodies, in these bodies moving on the earth for as long as we have, and how we've evolved and survived. And there's so much science around the system of the body, but then you add cosmic relational, bigger than us communication and relationship, and it's just such a landscape for literally putting your body and your heart and your lived experience into the spaces between all the things, and it always, to me, leads, in some way, to this big old, sometimes I cut, a void chasm of uncertainty. It's just, to me, it's like, if I know anything, at least for me, in all this movement and fumbling and screwing it up and trying and getting up again, it's if I know anything, it is that I know that I am uncertain.
I love that. I say something very similar. That and it's from the Tao Te Ching. It's I alone don't know. And I am like an idiot. My mind is so empty, you know.
Come on.
And sometimes I say that when I need that to break me out, because I'm like anybody else. I can fall on a track and start to think I know something and get a little bit of pride. And I've had to step away even from helping sometimes, because I think, I don't even know. Maybe it's just me, and everybody's different.
Absolutely.
We're all dealing with our own past stuff, but watch it closely because it can blind me. When I get a little success or a little bit of attention. And I think that might even come from just old wounds of wanting attention, wanting to be seen and loved for who I am, just plainly. And so when someone responds, I'll be honest, even with this work of this podcast, I mean, many times I will pull back and just take a break because world and start looking at the stats and all this garbage that has nothing to do with why I started to do it, right? And so it's tough, but I think I need to do that. I have to come back and just break it, break my mind all over again.
Absolutely. Just loud yes, affirmation yes. And I almost feel like it's food for it's like food. I mean, that's not the right way of framing it, but it's like, you know, thinking about a circle, like what keeps whatever spaces and experiences that feel so divine and nourishing and just detached, even just what you were sharing at the very beginning about, you know, kind of being with the trees and with nature, and where your kind of particular things almost kind of fall away. You just become the tree in those moments. And it's like for us to revisit and be in those places and to seek them and to need them and to fall on our knees in front of them. It's like, you know, the grimy devastation of, you know, and just messy devastation of like, all that ego, all that pride. And, you know, there's some things I'm always grappling with too, and I don't know, but I always grapple with like, what's healthy ego? What's not healthy ego? How do I move? You know, I have this pedestrian dignity is one of the things I experiment in. And just like you're saying with the podcast thing, brother, I can get so on my platform about like, you know, car-centric environments or the, you know, blah, you know, it's like, I'm not car shaming y'all beloveds. I hear you, but the systems are, you know, and I just I rage, I pound my fists, I sit in my certainty around y'all. We all need to just move our bodies and honor those who have no choice but to move them. And I won't budge. And it's just, you know, when you're revisiting that stream and the tree and the other elements, and, you know, thank God it washes away eventually.
I get this, man. I totally get this. I go through this same cycle, and I just wonder to how I feel too. I mean, I just went through this actually, like not too many weeks ago. Like I even told James, in fact, I said, I'm just going through a spot right now where I'm having to just look at everything again. And it's crazy how many times we do this. I think it's healthy though. I mean, as painful as it is, and even as frustrating as it is sometimes, because the work I'm doing, and I'll call it that, just the work that has nothing to do with being paid, but the work that comes out of my heart. You know, the things that I think are maybe my good work, whatever that is.
Right.
And so then I get a spark, a flame, it gets kindled, and I start to breathe on it. And just like any good fire, I start to feed the small pieces to it, and then I start throwing more into it, and it just starts to rumble, and then around there's a fire, and I'm like, hey, this is good. And then I start to realize that at some point, I don't know why I'm like this. I still haven't figured out how to stop it, but I think I'm just throwing things in to fuel it, like healthy things, and then I start throwing my feet and my hands and my bones and my skin. What else can I throw in? And I'm like, okay, now I'm happy that other people are sharing the warmth, but now I deplete all my... I deplete myself. And then I will, it's a cycle. I will then start to see the underbelly of what I'm doing because I get tired, I think. And then I start to question the value and the effect. Is it worth it? And I used to and start something new and try something else because in my thinking, my critical thinking, I was like, well, that just wasn't the right thing. Let me try something else. And what I realize now is that the only constant thing is me in every one of these sort of false starts. What I do now instead, I go, hey, I just need to identify when it's time for me to get out of my own way and get off my own, like all these little things I think I know. Take a breath, you know, and just look at it.
Totally.
Don't hate it, you know, just look at it and go, okay, maybe it's good. And maybe I'm actually just not, I'm being impatient, or I have goals, or all this ego stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure you do. Like, it just kind of gets convoluted to some degree. It's kind of like, I mean, and I don't know, right? And then you could have said, hey, I mean, because it obviously was good for you, correct? And then that could have just been like, you know what? I just need to walk 240 miles or 2,000 miles and just keep doing that.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense? Like, and you could have just got like on that track and then a decade go by and you're like, wow, man, I don't know what I'm even doing. Because it worked once, I didn't evolve it any further, you know, and it looks like you didn't do that. Obviously, you've evolved it into these... To me, I look at you, and again, I'm meandering all over the place,
Keep
but
going.
I look at what you're doing, and I was so fascinated by it because I could just see like how one thing seems to connect to the other, even through your art, you know, and your writing. It was just sort of this, in my opinion, you know, I discovered the pedestrian dignity thing at a perfect time, and then I didn't even realize it was yours, that you were connected to it. Yeah, I saw a video, and I have a child who rides a bicycle to work, and you know, she has where she lives, there's no crosswalk for her to get across a very, very busy area. Like, try to help her, like, okay, let's find the best path, you know, like the safest route for you to get to your job. And it's sad as a parent, you know, because I can't lift her up out of the situation she's in, right? And I was like, God, you know, this world that we have built is not designed for this pace or people who can't afford to have a car. So if you are in a situation where you are just trying to survive and live your life and get your head above water, a vehicle is like something you can't even begin to think about. So there's so many people that walking, and you've said that. I mean, I'm just repeating things that you've said. I mean, I heard you say those same things, though. There's so many people who are foot dependent. It's not like, for me to go for a walk is a luxury. I enjoy it. To go for a bike ride is a choice. It's not my survival. I can get in my car.
That's right.
And there's countless people that we don't see. They're surviving that way. And the world we've built, most in our community, is that way too. It is not designed for them. It's like we have forgotten them.
Absolutely. Yes. Oh my gosh.
I watched that video, man, and I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I'm kind of getting a little, probably my tone is changing because because it was so personal too. Believe it or not, I go on prayer walks. I connected to your work through walking so much. I mean, for years I did it alone. I would walk around spaces that I felt like that needed attention, and I would just walk in circles around them, just like, and keep the people within those spaces in my heart. And I started doing it for my city. I would walk through the city is somehow for the people of the city, you know, and even after the storms, would go to broken places and walk through them. Yep. And I connected to you in that way. And I guess I got hit by a car one day while doing that. And it got me. And then my daughter was recently hit by a car while riding her bike to work. And it was just like your video came out right when that was all kind of happening. And I was like, man, he's entering into this sort of forgotten space. At least to me, it's a forgotten space in my community. I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with that. I totally trailed off into a little tributary. But man, you've used your awakening and pointed it at things in such a beautiful, I don't know, connected way to the whole story and the way you've done it. I don't know. I think it's needed, and it's good that you turned your pain on that road into help for others.
It just, thank you for what you shared, and just honoring how it lives in your body and in the body of your daughter. Just the lived reality of so many, like you said, that face hostile, dehumanizing speeds and hardship just to make ends meet, to recover, to maybe even make a mental and physical social health choice, even if they can drive. A nature choice. There's something so rooted in the right that we have to move the way we're made to, by foot or on wheelchair, and how those to me, it's such a portal. It's a portal to so many things that we've touched on, not only our emergence as we evolve and think about ways to be more humble, to be more to heal divides, to be in the spaces between, not just in our cerebral thinking in the best way of writing, but like with our actual bodies, as you put so beautifully in your prayer walking, to comb the air with our vibration and our movement, and to break it with and to be available to the spontaneous porch side curiosity of this isolated body, because we've lost so much of moving the way we're made to, especially in the US. Most of the world still moves 8 miles a day. And so it's not like this is like going to solve so many, but the portal to me it's one of many things, but it's such a clear vibrational reality that is actively separating us from each other and the planet and our own interior development, connection, relationship, longing, grieving, but also it's just a wondrous invitation to being mirrored by things that we're made to be mirrored by, so we don't put so much pressure on our romantic partnerships to be the sole mirror of all of our grief and pain, so that we don't put our grief and pain inside of exclusive manipulative institutions that want to make money off of it or exploit it, so that we can be mirrored by this much broader story, that then those imperfect, but like those plates, I think you called them plates earlier, then those plates don't become as threatening. They just become other people's pathways. Instead of just these towers of dominion and destruction, they become other people's paths to learn, to cry, to grow. I just find that the unhurried movement in the spaces between all these lines it's one of many portals to, like you said several times, brother, like the waking up to not only our own beautiful, beloved purpose in this cosmic, beautiful, wondrous world where mystery is constantly beckoning us, but also waking up to devastating separation and speed
That is the word, devastating separation. I feel that in my bones. You know, like that is, you know, it's interesting. It makes me think about some walks I've went on in this past winter when we had some really sinking cold down here in the South. To me, those were the days to go out.
Yeah.
And I've often said this to my wife and other people that are close to me, is like, I actually like to feel the extreme weather on my skin. And I know it isn't comfortable, but I want to feel it. Like, I actually don't want, even if it's just for a short time, I want to know what that feels like to exist in the. But the other thing is to remember that not everyone is so insulated and comfortable as me.
Yeah.
You know, to have that sting of cold or that uncomfortable heat is a reminder that there's a brother or a sister out there that can't protect themselves from these elements that I can so easily nest up away from.
That's right. Yeah, you become, you know, I keep thinking you become this way more engaged participant to your own fragility, but also kind of thrashing, and this just very, again, this isn't like, it has become really, I don't know if profound's the word. It's something that's so human. And so like all the things, the walls, the screens, I mean, here we are, and there's gifts and all this stuff, but it's like to break it so we can go out and be with the elements, to move us into those edges, so that then also we can be witnesses of those who are totally trying to survive those edges every day. And where does that, you know, and where does that also, like, how does that show up in civics, in our voting, in the systems that we have, the world as it is? More stories, more art, more lived experience, not just talking heads throwing ideas back and forth, but we have the artists and the aching spiritual bodies and the people who hold so much nuance in their creative work, kind of moving into both the beauty and the devastation of it all as a way to bring us, evolve us, survive us, to love us, all of it. So, yeah.
I mean, because the reality is, I mean, and you know, I'm sure you can see it with your eyes, there's more separation and more pain to come. I mean, and that's an unfortunate thing that I guess we live with, and especially if you feel too much sometimes, that can be a heavy thing. Explain that to somebody who doesn't feel it, because it's like you have that, for me anyway, I'll speak for myself, it's like I have that hurdle first, that I have to, accept that I am weeping. Even if you don't see me weeping, I'm weeping probably more often than not. And if you don't see me actually weeping, know that I am. And it's not like I'm not weeping out of depression. It's weeping just for the world and all these sufferings. That's right there always. You know, and so it's getting over that into a functional activity or a service activity of some kind. And that weeping then sort of can act as like a thruster from the other side, you know?
That's right.
So it doesn't look like weeping to the world. Trying to do something, that's great, and give you the attaboys, and you hear how nice you are and likable and all the good things. And, you know, when people talk about you and you go, well, that's actually, and for me, so unfortunately, there's almost like this Zenarchist part of me that wants to go, I want to peel the skin off the front of that so you can see the weeping, the moaning engine that's right behind this. Calling it, you know, the civil names that we give all these works. There's actually a great pain underneath that.
Woo.
Does that make?
Yes, absolutely. And it even, and again, I'm referencing walking, bear with me, but it's like, it's also why for me, moving in general. And so if it's walking, if it's on a wheelchair, if you are in a place where you cannot be walking or using a wheelchair, it's even being outside, moving your arms and twisting your body. It's like just the act of being in motion, to literally just honor that aching realm. I have these little drawings I keep thinking of in our conversation, but one of them is honor thy ache. And so underneath, so we're all kind of on the surface, kind of doing what we can with the tools we have and the lives we have and the things we've been dealt. And underneath are all these, in different sediments of soil, there's these different just raw emotions and vibrations, rage, pain, sadness, like just love that like can't get all the way out because it hasn't raged yet, because it hasn't I just keep thinking about like violence and rage, and it's like, my God, what is out there sitting next to someone who is angry and raging energetically, and just saying, do I have the capacity? Can I be present enough to be in a place of rage? So help me to understand how angry you are. Help me to get as angry as you are so I can understand and see you. Like these places of rage that go so far beyond like attacking and repeating and projecting hurt and hurt and hurt. But what kind of spaces and places and realities are we creating that help me to be as angry as you are so we can release the rage? And
God, I get this, man. I do. I totally understand this.
I think walking or moving in some way, again, it's not a silver bullet, it's not a fix-it sort of thing, but it honors that we're in process, and it moves us. I think about the juniper, like we have dead skin that piles up as we sit inside of rooms where the wind is blowing off the dead skin. We're moving with all these different elements that nourish and teach. And, if we're doing that with added intention and care and prompting around some of these aches, like what can we release that is no longer needed, or at least that is, making more room for other, So.
I mean, I understand this because I used to believe or want to, or maybe I wanted it for myself, that as the decades crawl by, I would ultimately have some type of peace. And I know that just seems so strange to say, like, well, sure, but I honestly don't foresee that as a future anymore. Like, and I don't mean that in a negative way, because I almost have I've settled into this sort of ordinariness that's very plain and textured and bumpy, because this idea, sometimes I think it's just the commercialization of spirituality in general. It's like you can have this sort of serene, faux zen existence, and don't worry about what's going on, just chill, you can't do anything about it anyway, just be at peace, drink your tea, do your meditation. And look, man, I mean, I'm all about those activities. They're positive things. I mean, having a nice space, the manicuring of your life and the tweaking of things, we can do those things. But for me, I just feel like I'm living some kind of lie. And I think it happened even at the very beginning. Like, it's like juxtaposed right up against this extreme, beautiful interconnectedness that sort of came with a moment of like Satori type awakening. Was just right next to it was this great bulbous bladder suffering us. And it was like they were together. And I don't know that. I think I'm kidding myself to believe that I can have that kind of life, that I can just have this, you know, white guy enlightenment or whatever that is. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm talking about. I don't even know what the right word is, but I think now when I see that kind of stuff, I know this is crazy, but like I almost like smell toxicity. It's just not good enough. Like there's real cracks and real wounds that have not even begun to be addressed.
Yeah.
And if my spirituality is not at least bearing witness to them or acknowledging them in some tiny way, then I think it's just again, I can only speak for me. I'm lying to myself. That is that big oily tick just drinking the blood of the world and the life force out of people. And they need to be free from that. And if they're not free, I cannot accept my freedom. I don't know, man. That's probably like way out there for some people, but it's like it's probably dark. I mean, some people it is kind of dark.
Well,
you know,
I think. I mean, again, speaking for myself too, you and I are clearly mirroring some very similar things, and I have learned so much in that. As you described that, it's exactly how one of my drawings is, there's a hand reaching out, honoring what's possible. And there's a hand kind of on the ground of the earth, honoring what is. And it's like the body and the heart are in the tension of like the tension between like you said, like the whatever we describe as peace and serenity, but also devastating and hostile, like the injustices faced by inhuman lineages and pain and colonized reality, extraction, racism, classism, the things that are, whatever words we want to put to it, but where people have been made separate by laws and history and current systems, and the pain that ripples if you're open and awake and humble to just be with it and not trying to control it, manipulate it, do something with it, avoid it, block it. So if you're trying to just open yourself up to the world that is actually aching, and I think it's why the tension is so important, because if that is all you're inside of, it'll eat you alive. It'll destroy you. It wants to. It wants to destroy. It is devastating, so it will destroy you. And so this hand in this drawing reaching towards the, the meditation spaces, the deeper breathing, the spaces between, the slow walks with the trees where the flowers can literally nourish you with color and reverence, like to literally sit by the streams in a way that actually is radical and threatens oppressive consumption to find peace in plastic, that we can sit by a stream and be fed by and to release what's heavy as the stream without words helps to carry these things so that we can, in our own fumbling way, and I keep saying our and we, but me. Yeah. Man,
I'm with you though. I hear you. I can see you 100%. Feel it too, man. You are speaking. I mean, it's something that is just a part of you. You're talking about at least something, the way I would frame it is like there are, for every one of these bladders that's just full of the toxicity, there's a counterbalance on the other end of it.
Yeah, I keep going back to back to that story, and I always reference it. It's the wind in the trees that brought me out of that a really, a devastating choice, or falling into whatever that would have looked like for me. But just this, the wind in the trees, yes, what is right here is painful and terrifying and limiting and false, but real and raw and complicated and passed on from lineages in your family, Jonathon, of suicide and of depression and of all these different things that get carried, whatever it is, you're with it. And there's no, at least to just in being honest, I don't want to cover it up. I'm being consumed by it and the trees and the sky and the wind, literally breathing hope and horizons and healing, and branches that broke off so that the tree could grow higher, just break off what's like, thinking about trees as examples of wounds and healing. I'm always walking by trees. So if you're listening to this and you're in these complicated spaces, like, seek trees as teachers of wounds and branches that had to break, or branches that just started twisting and bending, like our beloved juniper that said, okay, no more is this area nourishing. I've got to break and bend and twist so that I can thrive and still show up in this complicated but wondrous space. Oh my gosh.
Man, this has been an incredible. This is exactly what I was hoping and just sensed we would have. Normal for you. I mean, I'm lucky through this podcast. I get to have some really dynamic conversations, but sometimes there's just that space that just exists across the distance, And I've really enjoyed this. I want to kind of divert our pace a little bit because the train left the station right at the beginning of our conversation, and I want to make sure that the people enjoyed what we've talked about, or whether they have enjoyed it or not. Maybe it hurt them, or maybe it's got them thinking. I'd like for them to know, maybe more specifically, what it is, the works that you do. I mean, and I know that you do a broad spectrum of things, but we've talked about walking, we've talked about art, we've talked about, pedestrian dignity. But maybe more specifically, if you don't mind, just kind of get a picture of what those look like.
Yeah. Gosh, thank you. What a gift just to be here. I would say it's constantly unfolding. This walking artist frame is constantly experimenting. And it just, what I'm finding, at least right now, is it's constantly weaving walking practice and invitation. So I spend a lot of time, just creating walking practices or thinking about how to host practices. With COVID, it's been really complicated to do that. But as things open, or in several years when they open, or wherever we find ourselves, like that is a space I care about a lot in terms of whether it's physically hosting or supporting people to be hosting meditative group or just individual. This book that I'm finishing in a week and a half will be out next summer. And I have poured so much of everything that we've talked about here into there's just a lot of practices in there that I think that I just have trusted with my own being and have been profound. I really care about meditation or practicing kind of funky. I don't consider myself a meditation teacher, but because I suck at it.
But you have things that you do, though. I mean, there's things that you practice. So I'm
currently on Insight Timer, and I experiment with walking meditation, and I do some live things on there. So you can check some things out there. I experiment a lot on Patreon as an artist. So becoming a patron is how to nourish the uniqueness of all these branches. Both in going deeper together, but just also resourcing in the world that we're in. And then through, a lot of my drawings and, I love ink drawing. I've always been an ink artist. And so I'm doing more art markets and getting creative with how to express through art making in that way, through poetry. Really interested in longer distance routes too. So I always, sometimes it's not, it doesn't fit for people to just say, hey, I'm going to take a week or a month or 6 months and go walk. And for some, it is possible. And so I'm available a lot also for just supporting people. And a lot of times I just say, like, take a weekend and just walk out your front door for 2 days. Have some backups, have your people check on you, drive by you, drop off a water, bury gummy bears somewhere, whatever it is, but just have them pick you up after day one and bring you back to your fit. But just go and be open and be safe to an extent, and lean into this world that is out there that wants to reach into your heart and your body. And I love to support and nourish people in that way. And so all of those things. Pedestrian dignity is obviously, so I play in social media, y'all, but woo, it's a tricky space. So I put a foot in and then I'm out. So
I'm with you.
All those things. So feel invited to just be along for the ride. If you want to just lean in, I do send an email out once or twice a month. And that's on the Intrinsic Paths website, and you can sign up for that. So.
Your website is very robust. I would tell people listening to go there first, because you can connect to all of those things through your website, and you can see the Juniper logo, and know what we're talking about.
I'm sending you a Juniper piece, brother.
Man.
I already know the one I'm sending you, so I need to get your address, by the way.
Happy, I know it.
Hey there, Good News listener. I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I've enjoyed producing it. Now, it's time for the Fishing for Goodies segment, where I turn my interviewer role over to the Good News Fish Bowl. Longtime listeners know that the Fish Bowl contains over 400 unique questions, many seeded by you, the listeners. Did you know that you could submit unique questions to the Fish Bowl? That's right. Just call the Good News hotline at 802-459-1668 to have your question added. You can also visit findthegood.news and send me an email. Now, let's take that dive into the Fish Bowl.
At the end of the show, or I say the end, it's kind of the last part is, I don't know if you can see this, we call it the Fish Bowl. And there's a section called Find Fishing for Goodies. And what I do is I ask you 3 questions out of this bowl.
Right.
I don't know what they are. We're just going to wing
idea.
it.
So
I
great.
always just grab from the bottom, and it sort of shuffles itself around.
I love it.
And
yes.
Sometimes they're fantastic. And look, if there's something I ask and you're like, hey, that's trash, let's go for another one, then we'll pull another one. I think this is a great question. I think this is I like this question. What makes you feel secure?
Wow, that's a really good one.
There may be a lot of things.
So many things, but I think this will be no surprise, but when I'm and it's usually on a longer, like when I've given myself permission to kind of really stretch out a long walk. When I'm on day 3, it's usually by day 3, because day 1 and day 2, I'm kind of shedding a lot of things. And it's usually that rising sun, as the sun is coming up. It's at least on day 3 or 4. And I can hear kind of the gravel under my feet and the wind, and the sun is rising, and the birds are so profound. And the chorus of serenity is like an ocean of nourishment filling my heart and helping me to feel seen and secure in all things. And so that's one.
I love that heightened. That's a heightened awareness. I mean, all the textures and sounds of the world symphony, I guess, and you're really able to see it all working together. I relate to that, man. I mean, I walk more than I probably talked about, but and it is very similar for me. I mean, the earlier morning, just watching, especially in the winter for me, I can see the steam come up off the pastures, and the sun kind of hits that at first moment. Little dewdrops on booms, like it's singing, and like,
that's right.
I don't know, almost howling that it's here,
Absolutely.
and the beauty of that you get to be this thing that has the capacity to witness it. I mean, to see it, to hear it, to feel it, and then to contemplate it, to actually be able to look upon it, being this witness, just a witness. Like, that is something that we get to do that I don't know what other creatures can do that. I mean, to actually, and then give voice to it, you know, and write poems and songs and do art as you do. I mean, that's just a beautiful thing. I mean,
gosh,
to be a human being.
I love the question.
I love that answer, man. I mean, I get it. I'm with you. A little more lighthearted question.
Yeah.
Not so heavy, so it might be easier. Have you ever won any kind of contest?
Ooh, that's a good one. You know, so the first thing that comes to mind is, you know, it was a big moment for me. I worked so hard in high school and in college to be an athlete, a championship athlete. I played basketball. My father actually played in the NFL, and my sister was a national volleyball. Incredible. I mean, just lots of athletic pressure. I mean, you know, my dad was pretty, you know, easygoing about it. I wouldn't say it was, but anyway, it was still in the blood. And I was like, my life needs to reach this. And it never did. I was always the best third place, you know, whatever it was, which was fine. But it was, I lived in Southern California, and I played beach volleyball for 3 or 4 years. For 5 or 7 years, and learned it really quick, fell in love with it. It feels like another lifetime ago, but the championship I won was, you know, you go through these different levels, and it's called your AAA, and it's a big tournament, and my partner and I won it. And it was just, I'll never forget laying in the sand and just smiling all the way across the sky. So yeah.
Felt good. Yeah.
Felt really good. So beach volleyball. Yeah.
Man, I know this has nothing to do with the question, but I'm very curious. How old were you when you came out?
Yeah.
Because you brought it up earlier, and I mean, I didn't touch on that, but I mean, it was obviously a huge part of your life. I mean, to actually finally just go through and go, okay, I'm going to brought out into the world. I was just very curious. My son is gay.
Oh, right on. Yeah.
You know, he's told me how hard it was, even though he says even knowing that y'all were not going to there wasn't going to be no problem. There was still this sort of pressure, you know, and carried it around for a while before finally just accepting and saying. Just curious, because I mean, he was very young when he told us. I mean, he was probably, I want to say he was in the 6th or 7th grade.
Yeah. So,
you know. Yeah.
So that's when I started really it was very clear to me, 6th and 7th grade, when I'm like, oh, this is not, you know, and with all the, you know, environmental reality that so many are still in, this is not the right.
It was hell for him. I mean, kids were just cruel and practically evil to him. I mean, for a lot of years. So
yeah, it's rough. So I publicly, openly came out when I was 26, 27. And so I did my cross country walk when I was 27, 28. So it was really close to that kind of, to that opening because even when I was, speaking of just the time in Ireland when I was on that road, you know, that was when I was 24, 25, and I just wasn't fully accepting. I was just, I was battling. It was a battle. And
so that was a big part of that. That was mixed right in, wedged into that.
Yeah. Yeah. So 26, 27 was when I just really was okay, this is it. This is it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I was curious. I mean, everybody's experience is different, you know. Mean, as a parent and you know, trying to help your child navigate the world.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, knowing you have to look at the landscape and go, you know. And as a parent, you want to protect your child. You know, the fears of what other people are going to do to them or how they're going to perceive them, treat them or mistreat them. You know. So I was just wondering if you were younger. I mean, again, thank you for sharing it. I mean, it's probably a direct.
It's all right. No, we've already flowed there. It's totally. Thank you I'm grateful you asked, and Yeah. And I always welcome being a resource for people who are in that really kind of, in any stage of that process, or know people who are, and just being a safe and open, spacious. God, that's just such an important way of being around some of the, the LGBTQIAS plus, all anything sexual. I mean, spacious in general around anything, but like sexuality stuff, beloved. We are like how we can be so wide with our hearts and our capacity to listen and witness. It's so complex. So yeah, always willing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's, we've talked about this a lot in our home over the years. I mean, we and its home, just in general as humanity, we seem to find all these different identifiers and ways to sort of judge or segregate or slice each other up into categories. And we love those that are like us, but we're not very good at that generally. Those that aren't like us, and that's really sort of where all the interesting things are happening is, I mean, so it's almost like, I don't know, people are like good books in a lot of ways. I mean, if we're just going to read one type of book, I mean, that's boring. After a while, it's the same story, So, yeah.
I love it.
Well, look, I got this one last one out of the fishbowl. This is interesting. I'm actually curious about this one, too. It says, what part of your routine do you always try to skip?
Great questions. Love your bucket of questions. What part of you? Okay, so first of all, and my partner would definitely attest to this, I'm not much other than knowing that I need to get out and move and walk like daily to just be in the kind of vibration that I trust and love. And so other than that, like I have zero routines.
That's good. That's actually kind of cool.
I'm just like, which probably speaks to some of your questioning around, wow, this guy's drawing pictures and writing poetry and doing pedestrian dignity, and he's leading walking groups, and he's like, and writing a book. I mean, I have a very nonlinear existence. And so avoiding routine is actually extremely easy. And wondrous. I would say, though, within the walking piece, since that is a place of routine, you would think that I would have great practices around water, drinking water, and sunscreen. And I'm awful at it. I don't drink enough water. I'm in Denver, Colorado. I'm a mile high in the sky. I should be drinking so much water. So drinking enough water and sunscreen I gotta, from a place of love of self.
Yeah, I'm with you. See, I have to drink water here, or it's extremely humid where I live, and so I drink. I'm a sweater.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I can think about going outside, and I'm going to just start sweating. I mean, I've always been that way, so I will be robbed. The humidity will rob me of, a gallon by noon if I'm outside. And so I have to just drink constantly the water, but a long time, you know. But this is something maybe isn't the question, but I am curious to know this. Do you have objects or items or totems or things that you bring with you when you walk that are just like a part of it? Like you go, I don't want to go walking without this. They're like friends that you bring with you. And I don't mean people. But do you have items that are like that, like your walking stick or something?
Yeah, there's several things. I'm going to show you. So walking stick, absolutely. I mean, it depends. Sometimes if I'm doing some pretty intense city walking and I know I'll be confronting some harsh environments and maybe doing some pedestrian dignity kind of documenting, then I won't typically have the stick. But when I'm kind of in a more meditative, just when I'm just out doing, whether it's my practice or I'm doing a longer day, having a walking stick is so important to me. It's another connection to ground. It's a practice of humility. It's a reminder that we all need help and not, like I care so much about what a walking and it also can whack a car if it's getting too close and whatever it needs to do. But there's, in the last 2 years, this is it's pretty compact, pretty light. And it's just one of those seats.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know what that was. I see like a fold out seat.
Yes. I'm telling you so I always have I always have a sketchbook inside of my backpack with my favorite pens and that chair, because I just love kind of sitting under any number of trees throughout a day or a walk, and having the freedom to kind of sit back,
That's
put
awesome,
my legs
man.
up, sketch and write. Oof, it's so good.
I'm with you, man. I kind of carry a bag and a stick for sure. I have several. The sticks have become like they're like people.
Yes.
Honestly, I have one that I've talked to him. He was with me when I got hit by the car, and I was like, "Boy, you have really you've seen it all." I mean, this stick, I told it. I was just like, "You've been with me through so much." That stick actually said it saved my left arm, actually.
Oh my gosh. See? Jeez.
Like I was walking with it in my left arm, my left hand, and my arm was bent. And so when the car hit me,
oh my gosh,
the mirror was what hit my arm first, and then it tore the back of my arm open, but like the way my arm went up and the stick flew. And the guy told me, he said, because they were trying to take me into the ambulance, and I said, "I got to find this. I've had this thing for 20 something years. I've got to find the stick."
Wow.
And so I found it, and he was like, "Were you carrying that?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Man, that probably kept your arm from getting snapped off at the elbow, because your arm went up instead of like, because it hit right there at that joint." And I thought, wow, that's so odd, like how just one little thing like that can make all the difference, just the arm being in a weird position. It's wild, man.
Yes. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So look, I got one last question for you.
Yeah.
And this one's not out of the fishbowl. I ask every guest this, and I'll tell you just briefly the story for the listeners that haven't heard it in a while. So often my family at the end of the day, years ago, we would just say, "Hey, how was your day?" And what I started to notice was to tell the stories, the interesting stories, which most of the time were negative things. Somebody said this to me today, or this person cut me off, or, I had this bad experience at school. And I realized that we weren't really getting to the positive things. It was like we weren't having like gratitude. I mean, I was guilty as well, lingering on the negative. And so I just said, what if we just changed, like, what if I did this personally, inside? I said, what if I just changed one word? Did anything happen today? How was your day? I just said, did anything good happen today? And it was strange to watch, like, how that shifted the way we talked about our day. It was like, did anything good? And there was like this, at first it was like this pause, right? Like, did anything good happen today? And then as the years went by, when I picked my son up from school, he knew I was going to ask him that. And so when he would get in the bad, let me tell you what happened today. Really wasn't anything great, but the janitor had to call in sick, and so I got to like take his trash cans out to the big dumpster for him today. And I was like, how interesting is that? Like, I thought that he is now wired to look for something good, and he's something that most people would be like a chore.
Oh yeah.
He found the good in the chore. And I was like, that's kind of cool. So did anything good happen today?
Oh my gosh. I think the first thing that comes to mind, and it's something that's been shared a lot in many ways in our beautiful chat, but it's, I spent a lot of the day walking and writing, so very much with that chair and under a lot of trees. And there was a very tangible moment where, I was stressing and getting in my head about, nobody's going to read this. You're just rap. It's just like, whatever the mind wants to do to kind of sabotage. And there were some other stressful things that were kind of surfacing earlier. And, but as soon as I kind of shifted environments a little bit and sat under this tree and started kind of revisiting the writing from a place of compassion and curiosity, oh my God, it was just such a tangible moment where the coolness of the wind and the coolness of the grass and the way that the leaves kind of brushed over the small pond in this park, and to just lean back and to be, it was just a moment. It wasn't forever, but it was just this, it was just a hug, and it was good. It was good.
Man, that's great. Yeah. We need that so often. I hear you. I had a moment like that about a month holiday, and I just didn't want to go to whatever it was. And I said, I'm just going to go paddle out the bayou at sunset. And I was by myself and way out, and the sun was kind of sinking. And man, I just felt this overwhelming just sobbing, man. I mean, I know that's probably not what people think is good, but it was like a loving sob. And man, I was able to, at the top of my lungs, just wail. God, there's nothing here to judge me. Only thing that sees me is the sun and the clouds. And I just let it all go. And it was so healthy for me, man. I needed it so bad. I didn't realize how bad I needed to just have a good cry, man, with nothing to witness but just nature,
Beautiful. All of that. All of that.
What's the best way? I mean, where do you like for people to connect with your work, man? Is it your website first, or do you like just anywhere? Just follow the links, right?
Yeah, just follow the links. I think the website is good. If people want to go, if they want to lean in and go deeper, support the work, Patreon's a good way. But really just the website is,
sure.
That's a good place to start. And, keep an eye for this bookie thingy that's going to,
it's, you can reveal that.
Yeah, it's North Atlantic Books.
Right on.
And it's going to be, the working title. The working title was Walking as Waking Up, and we still might be using that. But I just love it. With a lot of compassion. But there's other title. We might just call it Walk, and underneath that will be slowing down, waking up, and connecting at 1 to 3 miles an hour. So just some creative. So keep an eye out for that, because that'll be next year. And but I think the website is great, and just leaning in that way is wonderful. So thank you for asking. Yeah, and thank you for hosting this space. Just to the listeners who might be just alongside of you and who are on this journey with you in all kinds of ways, that there's something so beautiful about something like, and it doesn't have to be Patreon, but what I love about the invitation, especially the non-transactional invitation, where it's like leaning into nourishment and relationship of creative people, or people who are kind of reaching into the guts and hearts of who they are made to be, or how they're made to ache, and how they're made to kind of create and weave, and the amount of time, the heart, the energy, the hosting of podcasts. Like, you are a beautiful, skilled host, and just these. So there's this matrix of beautiful creative outpouring that yes, in some ways is not transactional and is so worthy in this time of being nourished. And specifically in this time, if we want our artists or people who are bringing creative invitation with heart and with love and with humility, if we want our artists to be more freed up, to be truly like reaching into more of these spaces, oh my gosh, we need to get creative with how we nurture them. And I'm to the people who follow your beautiful podcast, become a patron for the people and for the creative work.
Yeah, because I do. You're right. That's how I feel. I'm with you. You know what? It's interesting because the Patreons that I do support, that's exactly why. Yes. Because I look at those people and I go, look, they've they're taking a huge gamble, some of them, you know, because they're going, look, I'm gonna just lean in. And I try, you know, and sometimes the investment so often, and I'm like, you know, because they know that if they can get enough people to just go, hey, you know, I support you, then it can actually support them.
And we just need it.
We
need creatives to be freed up. I mean, for the painters, the songwriters, the podcasters, the walking artists, the drawers, I mean, all the people that literally with their bodies and hearts and invitations are literally brush stroking our aches and the spaces between. We need them to be freed up, and we need us to be freed up in all these different ways. So blessings.
Man, that's a good way to put it. We need those people to be freed up so they can do their work on this world. We do. You're right. I mean, I've heard somebody say something similar about, you know, certain like ministers, for instance. They're like, look, some of these people that are in ministry of any kind, they're not getting paid. They're working and raising families sometimes on top of funerals and, you know, death work.
Majorly.
Sick work, chaplaincy, all these things. And I'm like, you know, that's true. There's a whole other layer that they're doing out of their spirit, but they still have to do the survival work and put for the food, water, shelter. And that's, imagine what they could do if all that time.
Yes.
Yeah, this is great, man.
That I found.
Thanks for listening to my Beacon Series conversation with Jonathon Stalls. If you'd like to learn more about Jonathon's work, please visit the links in the show notes. If you found something of use in this conversation, please share this episode with a friend, leave a review, or consider visiting findthegood.news/donate, where you can help me continue this good news mission from the Louisiana Gulf Coast. I thank you for pressing play and for syncing up with this good news beacon.